Good evening, and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and during these half-hour programs, which we'll be presenting twice a month, I'll be talking to writers about their craft and their ambitions, their dreams, their careers in writing. Those careers might be in poetry, they might be in fiction, they might be in journalism, they might be in songwriting or advertising. We plan to cast a very, very wide net. We'll be sharing information, of course, but besides that, we hope to have a good time. The Writer's Block will be a relaxed half hour with a lot of variety, and it's going to be open as well to your comments. If you have ideas for us here on the Writer's Block, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, watch for the Writer's Block address at the end of the program, right after the credits. Now, I'd like to tell you something about tonight's guest, Carol Dine. Miss Dine has recently published a first collection of poems titled Naming the Sky. That was published in 1988 by the Golden Quill Press. We'll have more on that later if you're interested in obtaining her book. Her poems have appeared in Women's Review of Books, Spoon River Quarterly, Yankee, Calliope, and Colorado Review. She was awarded a fellowship to Yaddo and currently has a residency in the Artists Foundation Writers' Room of Boston. Ms. Dine tours New England as a performing artist and is now on the English faculty at Suffolk University in Boston and teaches poetry workshops at Salem State College and Endicott College. She makes her home in Marblehead, Massachusetts. Let's go over and meet Carol right now. Hi, Carol.
Hello, John.
I'm glad you can make it.
My pleasure.
I noticed here that one of the poems that you recently published was in the Spoon River Quarterly.
Right.
Spoon River is a beautiful, flat, mellow, relaxed river in Illinois that I'm in love with. How did you hear about the Spoon River Quarterly?
Throughout my career, I had heard the magazine was published very high-quality poetry, and then I saw recent copies of it when I was at Yaddo, and I sent about 4 poems. And the editor sent back one, would publish it if I would make some revisions, so I immediately
made the revision
very quickly and sent them back, and she accepted 2 poems, actually.
Good. I like that nitty-gritty angle on the real life of poetry.
Right.
You didn't have any moral qualms and didn't pace the ocean about changing a word.
I am much too practical.
Good, good. Can you read us a poem?
Surely. This one is called Lilacs, and I wrote it actually this spring. Last May in my neighbor's yard, hedges of blossoms, a choir in purple robes, the deep and fragrant song. This winter was long and early without snow to warm the roots. When the cold moved into spring, the lilacs missed their season. Invisible moths bored away inside the stems, laying their eggs in the wounds. At Barnegat Harbor, rain grazes the windshields, the rocks, a wall of boys. A fisherman is putting away his traps. The mesh is broken. He looks like my lover who died, the same wheat blonde hair. Loneliness is perennial. It isn't just lilacs that fail.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Did you have a lover who died?
Yes, he died about 6 years ago.
Is that poem particularly difficult for you because of that?
No, actually, it feels, every time I mention him in my poetry, it feels like a more tribute or not particularly painful, no.
Tribute, good,
Right.
good word. The death of a lover, of course, is not something planned or chosen, but the nature imagery in there, the nature and the sea imagery in there is chosen, and you live on the sea or close
Right.
to the sea. How do you use nature? How do you use the surrounding nature here, the sea, in your poetry?
Well, actually, I find nature extremely healing force. I moved to Marblehead about 4 years ago and have obtained much of my imagery and symbolism from the nature around. Barnegat Harbor actually is a real harbor right near an area where they fish, go fishing.
In Marblehead? Or
Right,
not?
right.
Well, I hadn't heard it. I'm not
Yes.
familiar with Marblehead. Traffic's too tough.
And there are lobster traps there, and this actually happened. This scene is a real scene, and the moments actually happen.
So this is, in a sense, a journalistic poem because it reports a lot of actual fact.
Right, right. We had a very cold spring, and the lilacs were not flourishing. In fact, that started me writing the poem. I took notes on how the lilacs looked to me, and then I put together other things with it.
Let me go from something specific, that poem, Lilacs, to something more general.
Sure.
As a poet, you're not going to get famous. Even if you're as famous as James Dickey, you can walk down the street and no one's going to run up and ask for your autograph. And you're certainly not going to get rich. So, let's get real here. Why do you bother?
Well, I've been writing poetry for 17 years and feel like at this point I have to do it. I write to figure out what's going on around me. I write because it's the only way I can express the beauty around me, the pain around me. So that's the first step. If I get published, fine. If I get to appear on television with you, John, fine. Never planned, but I have an inner need to express myself in poetry.
So it's primarily between you and the paper and you and yourself.
Me and my soul, me and my solitude, yeah.
So you're not going to stop.
I don't plan
don't
to.
see it. You
no.
couldn't stop.
No, I can't.
Right. Would you pick another poem and read it for us?
Sure.
From your
something
book?
from the book, okay. The center of my book is called Fugue, long prose poems, which I wrote when my father was dying. I don't mean to keep mentioning death, but it's had a big influence on my life. So I'll share this with you. I'll read one part. Fugue. What do you want for Father's Day? I ask my father, who's dying. Don't bother with a shirt or tie, he smiles. Pajamas, I think to myself. In the department store, I walk past cruise wear, past formal wear, over to sleepwear. The display sign says, "Remember Dad on his day." On the shelves, the pastel and print pajama sets are stacked on top of each other in plastic bags. They look forlorn, like unwanted pets no one will take home. I asked the salesgirl if she would let me see a size medium. The pajamas are beige with brown trim, short sleeves, and short pants. I remember pictures of my father as a young boy going to school in Bermuda shorts, cut like pajamas. My father's a big man, I tell the salesgirl, but he's sick, so I'll take the small. He'll get a lot of wear out of these, she says. I leave the pajamas on the counter and run out of the store. The next day I buy my father a silver helium balloon. It has big hearts drawn on with lipstick. The man in the store pumps it up and says it will last about a week. I tie the balloon to my father's nightstand with a blue ribbon. Happy Father's Day, I whisper. He used to put his eyeglasses and cufflinks on the wooden stand. Now it holds his morphine and syringes. I sit beside my father's bed and watch him and the balloon. Once in a while he wakes up, sees it rising over his head, and says, "Good." He returns to a deep sleep. I am afraid when the balloon starts to deflate, he will stop breathing. I wish my father would get out of bed and walk to the window. I wish his soul would escape to the balloon and float over the bedroom, keeping my mother company.
Very nice. Very nice. How long ago was that written?
Let's see, he died about 7 years ago. I had a bad few years there. So I actually took, it sounds funny, but I took notes to figure out what to do and to figure out the pain while he was dying. And a friend who was a poet urged me to write a poem. I said, oh, I just couldn't. It feels so, I don't know, voyeuristic something, sadistic something. But I did. I wrote, and I'm really glad I did.
Did he see any of this?
He hasn't seen this. He's seen other my poetry. He couldn't tolerate it.
He couldn't tolerate it?
No. He wanted me to write about someone else's family, someone else's grandfather.
Stuff was too close to
right,
the
he couldn't stand his own emotions, never mind mine. No.
I like the image of the helium balloon, and I thought of that as the soul through the poem, and then you attach it to the soul. How did you get that idea? Where did it come from, do you remember?
I bought the helium balloon. This, again, happened. I went looking for pajamas and bought the helium balloon.
When you
instead.
bought the helium balloon, were you thinking poetically, I'm going to buy this helium balloon because it looks like a good image for the soul?
No, but I didn't realize it. But I see life as a poet, so I bought the helium balloon as his daughter, the poet. Right.
Can you remember that idea or other particular ideas, how they mesh, how they come together? When did it occur to you that the helium balloon would stand up as a good image for a soul?
No.
Silver helium balloon.
I live poetry, but I don't, I'm not writing it. I don't think I'm writing it all the time. Another idea, another example. I can't, I don't know if this is applicable. We have a cat, and she always sits on the windowsill and listens. I mean, like she's, the rain puts her in a trance, and I always knew I would use that sometime. And I stare at her, and I use that in another poem. My cat on the windowsill listening to the inside of the rain, and it's part of a love poem. I always knew I'd use it, and didn't know where it would fit.
I think one of the directions I'm trying to go is a lot of people ask me, where do the ideas come from? Do you find they come out of the blue often, or is it a matter of putting your butt down at the desk and staying there for 4 hours or 5 hours or 6 hours?
It's a combination. Sometimes I'll get an idea and write it down. I have a notebook in my car. I have a notebook beside my bed, and I write them down. Other times I do sit for, I'd say, 5 hours a day, at least 3 times a week in the writer's room in Boston, and I just grind it out. Yeah.
Can you go on about that just a little bit more, about the process, the mechanical process of creating poetry?
Sure.
In your schedule, I guess.
Okay. As I said, I got a space in the writer's room, which is in the transportation building in Boylston Street downtown, and I have books there, and I bring in, right now I'm working on a series of poems about the American Indians and their burial customs, and I have all my books, and I read my notes, and I write down phrases that seem interesting, and then I think about it and rework it and say it out loud to myself. And so part of it's inspiration, and part of it is just plain grind until I get it right.
But it takes both. You don't wander around until it strikes, and then
No. I work. I at least 3 or 4 days a week. I sit there for 5 or 6 hours. Right.
You have a poem here that's on the table that I want to ask you to read. It's a newer poem. It's not in the book. At Sea. Would you read that for us?
Sure. If you can be with a man on the ocean, you can be with him anywhere, she tells herself, heading for open water. He shoots the sun with his sextant. She wants danger, the edge where the heart quickens, and later to be safe. It is her watch tonight as 10-foot waves ride her to the top, then down into the trough. He takes the helm, checking his heading, the trim of the sails. She envies his eyes. She loves him when the storm becomes gentle and the moon catches in his beard. When they kiss, she saves his breath in her mouth. Sometimes she thinks of him as the enemy in their tight cabin, he stinking of sea salt, she feeling the boat pitch beneath her thighs. On the fourth day out, black clouds, a rogue wave port side and the jib sheet loose. He yells, "Damn it, cut the line," his eyes wild as if she made the storm. Winds, rain for days, they are steeping in brine, their skin raw and gray. He fishes with half an oar. From the cockpit they watch the spreader lights fallen like stars. They drift at the mercy of tides.
There's a line in there that's magnificent, among many others. She saves his breath in her mouth. Did that hit you? That seems like a line that
I knew it was
would
right.
hit.
I had a visceral attack when I
And that
wrote
was
the
going
line.
to stay no matter what?
Yeah.
Do you remember when you thought of it or how you thought of it?
Just in the process of writing, I was getting to the love section, and I, make myself. I feel mellow when I'm writing it. No anger, and just feeling very romantic and tender, and thinking nice thoughts, and it just came.
This poem and an earlier poem you read are both about relationships. When I read this before the show, I was thinking of Adrienne Rich's book, Diving into the Wreck.
Oh.
You've got some sea images, you're doing some diving into the wreck yourself about
Right.
male and female relationships. Do you think there's any hope for men and women relationships in 20th century America?
Hope, it's a hard word to address. Very difficult. Relationships are very difficult. A lot of pressures, both try to be yourself as a woman and have the man be himself, and follow careers, and deal with children and aging parents, and yet have enough left over to be loving. I don't know how to answer it. It's extremely challenging. There are often too many choices. When even in our parents' generation, they knew they were going to stay together. Most people stayed together, and they became as much of themselves as they could be creatively or in business, and because they weren't going to leave. Death parted people, but now there's a lot of choices. You have two arguments and you're out the door. So I don't know. One day I'm totally blissful. The next day I am out the door. So I can't answer
And
that.
you didn't lunge at that word hope.
I can't hope. I have more hope for my writing than I do for my love life. I don't know.
I don't know if I want to go into that. That's is that optimistic or pessimistic?
Just realistic.
Realistic. How do you fit poetry into a life, career, your mother? You have 2-3 jobs. You're doing workshops at Endicott and Salem
No,
State.
they're
You're
part-time.
teaching in Suffolk.
Yeah.
How do you fit poetry into your life as not as a part of a process at the office or on Boylston Street, but as a consciousness? How do you keep it foremost in your mind?
Well, I think because I have the schedule of going to this room, 3 days a week, that because I know I'm going, then I don't feel that I can't cook dinner, I'm in the middle of something. Because I have that time, the minute I get into the car to drive to Wonderland, I am doing my work as a poet. So I don't.
It's not a bad image.
Right.
Driving to Wonderland.
Driving to Wonderland.
Title, yeah.
So then, I know a lot of people maybe not as fortunate and don't have a schedule that they keep to, and they should try to make a schedule, but I have a schedule. So I know a lot of women feel they just don't want to do the laundry, they don't want to take care of the kids, they want to write, and I don't have to, I don't have to worry about when I'm in the house because I have this office, that's where I write, and it doesn't take away from my chores as a maid or that kind of thing.
Do you have another poem you'd like to read? We can talk you into
Let
it
me think.
from the book, or
See. Okay. Try to find something lighter, I don't know. Let's see.
a poet that doesn't read 2 or 3 poems about death would be very disappointing. I
Right,
think, to
well, I'll
everybody.
try to find something more. Night, early fall. This is I bring the cat into this. Tonight our calico cat arches her lean back on the windowsill, uneven ears perked, listening to the inside of the rain. She bends her head to lick her paw, self-contained, blessing us with her small breath. When you asked me to live with you, I left my solitude for this house where the moon glances through giant windows and the red and blue oriental rug covers the marks on the oak floor. Through the window, the beach roses are dispossessed by bare trees rising over the road. The houses are buried alive. I pray for the sky to open, for stars to spray the evening dark before its time.
Where did that come from?
My blissful little home.
Your blissful little poem with your cat watching
Or the rain.
the rain.
Right.
What other poets, if you can see evidence in this poem or the poems you've read before, what other poets have influenced you? Maybe I should make that more general. What's influenced you? Maybe it was not a poet, maybe it wasn't a writer, maybe it was other people, institutions, experiences. What's been a major influence on you?
It's a lot of influences. My first poetry teacher, formal poetry teacher, was Anne Sexton, and she, of course, changed my life by recognizing my work, and she said she wanted to work with me, so I went to her home in Weston, actually, the summer before she died. So she was a big influence.
Some time ago, that was 15 years ago?
76, yeah.
76 she died?
I think it was. So that was a big influence, and also the fact that she chose to kill herself was, I remember, I think I stayed home for a week and covered myself with an antique quilt I bought and wondered if I was going to continue with this poetry business. I mean, if it was going to lead to my death, I didn't, by my own hand, I didn't want to do it, and I decided I didn't need to do that. I could, live my life to its fullest without having, and write about death without having to end it the way she did.
Were you angry at her?
Oh, I'm not angry. I understood, why she did it. I even had a premonition she was going to do it. She seemed in that state, and her writing was all about that. I just feel lost that she wasn't around, to be a friend, for me to read more of her work, for her to be my mentor. It was terrible. I mean, I didn't get to spend much time with her at all. It's a loss to the world.
Who else?
Stanley Kunitz has been a friend and mentor for years. And I love his work. It's really beautiful, personal, strong, honest. I really love his work. And there's so many other poets I can't even mention. I'm reading Joy Harjo, an Indian. She's an American Indian.
In connection with the work you're
Yeah, that just came. It's
right
a new thing for me. I don't know. Did you want to know how that came about? That's
Sure.
interesting.
Yeah.
I was on a trip in the Dominican Republic in a little place called Punta Cana, and the tour guide, we were on a bus going through the little narrow roads, and the tour guide started talking about the Indians who had lived there. And she said that when the chief died, he was buried with his youngest, prettiest wife, and the woman, the squaw, was buried alive. And they found it because they'd find her bones, and her mouth was like this, and her hand so they knew she didn't like to be there. It wasn't her choice.
This sounds like kind of a awful setup for a joke. It's not a joke.
No, it's not a joke. Why do you think? I mean, I wouldn't want to go like that, would you?
No, I wouldn't. It just sounds so fantastic.
It's fantastic.
I guess,
so I kept putting that image of this woman buried alive, this Indian, in like all my poems, all my anger poems, my man or my father. And a colleague I work with, Barbara Helfgott Hyatt, said, "Would you take this out? You just don't put it in there. Do another poem about this Indian who was buried alive." So I started doing this, and I started doing research on Indians and burial customs and all. And all of a sudden, I just was blown away. I knew I was onto something that was going to take at least 3 or 4 years of my life to do these poems. So I'm on I just finished a second manuscript, and now this is going to be a third big project. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I think I thought of that as a joke too. I just heard a horrible joke a couple of weeks ago. The punchline has to do with squawberry. It's a pun on strawberry. Squaws burying somebody.
I'll give you that one. You want to open the little box?
Not yet. We'll save the little box. Save the little box for later. We have just a few more minutes. Would you like, and can I talk you into reading 1 or 2 additional short poems?
Okay.
I think we have 2 minutes. Excuse me. I just saw the handwriting on the wall. We have only 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
So we don't have time for another poem.
Oh, okay.
If we want to tell the audience about your book and where it's from, we want to do that. I know we want to do that. This is Carol's book, Naming the Sky, and it's published by, get this right, the Golden the Golden Quill Press.
Right, right.
Do you know the address? Right
It's
offhand?
Francistown, New Hampshire.
In Francistown, New Hampshire.
Right.
That's Franceston, New Hampshire. There's no zip code in here. I suspect that you don't
I know
need,
it by heart.
You don't need a zip code for Francistown.
03043.
03043.
Right.
That's Carol Dine, Naming the Sky, Golden Quill Press, Francistown, New Hampshire,
03043.
03043. Thank you very much for being
My
with
pleasure.
us.
Thank you.
I think I hear faintly the Writer's Block Big Band building up for our exit here. I want to thank our audience very much for being with us too. I hope you've learned something valuable about Carol's writing or about writing in general. If you have, then the show's been a great success. Please be with us next week when we have another guest on the Writer's Block. Good night.